Hey everyone and welcome to the channel. If you love epic large-scale real-time strategy games like Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander, you've probably heard of a game called Beyond All Reason. It's a community-driven open-source RTS game that's making its mark and will be rolled out onto Steam in the not-too-distant future. Well, today I have the privilege of sitting down with two key members of the development team to talk about the game, their vision, what the future holds, and how both of them got into Beyond All Reason and what goes on behind the scenes. First up, we've got Beherith, who's the game's lead developer, and joining us shortly after will be Tarnished Knight, who's the game's engine developer. We'll cover plenty from gameplay mechanics to the challenges of developing an ambitious RTS in today's competitive gaming landscape, as well as the recent stress testing that's been going on. So if you're a fan of bar, or just have a keen interest in game development, I'm sure you'll get plenty of value from this video. Hi Beherith, would you like to kick us off and start just telling the audience a bit about yourself and how you got involved in Beyond All Reason?
All right. So yeah, I used to be up until about half a year ago, a university researcher, and I started BAR around, or at least the most of the groundwork and the foundation I laid around 20 end of 2010 up to about 2014. That's when the major remodeling effort was approximately completed. I think about 2015, 2016 is when that finished. Then the enthusiasm from my part petered out for a few years here and there, and then in 2019, when Floris, Isex Quick, and Taku did a huge effort to pick up where we left off, I joined back, and since then we've been doing a really fun romp on getting everything working together and getting everything sorted for players, for fleshing out the new player experience. And since then, it's been a pretty delightful run. And it's been really great to see the entire community grow and to see how much people enjoy it, and just to give everything a nice polish. Mostly, my role involves a technical lead on the front. Mostly, it's graphics, sometimes engine, and basically everything from the animation pipelines to the mapping pipelines to a lot of the scripting, almost all of the graphics work, as in the shaders and all kinds of things. So those are mostly my roles, along with a lot of administration, running servers, and things like that.
Wow, that's quite a lot of work.
Yeah, it's been quite the effort. And when I was working at the university, luckily I had enough free time to do most of this.
So this is like a full-time job on top of a full-time job.
No, I've half a year ago I switched to a different full-time job. So actually, I now have less time for bar, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think most of the stuff that I wanted to do are in a good state, and the entire community and all the other developers have been absolutely amazing in picking up where I don't necessarily have enough time to do everything. So since it's such a huge community of, I can't even count, 50 to 100 people who are always active, who are always seeking new challenges, who are super helpful when any issue comes up, it's really great to be able to talk on just Discord and figure out what's going wrong, how to fix it, what direction to take that in. And I would personally like to make a big shout out to Discord here, even though it's maybe it may seem trivial, but Discord was a very large catalyst in allowing us to work so efficiently together and to work so rapidly and to immediately be able to take ideas back and forth and to ease the development process. And really, it's been an excellent communication channel on all fronts. So it's been very helpful. Yeah, previously the like a forum type structure or even an IRC type structure was just insufficient for this kind of very rapid back and forth, and the structured discussions that Discord allows us to have with all the individual channels within the server are truly amazing. Like, and even small things like being able to immediately share larger files, larger videos, screenshots, everything very seamlessly, along with a actually moderately usable search function, really makes it a great catalyst for people who want to work together.
Yeah, because Discord has massively blown up for you guys now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to see so many people. It used to be very interesting where I could follow every single discussion and every single channel up to about maybe 2, 3 years ago was the tipping point where I am no longer able to follow everything. It's impossible for any single person to follow every discussion everywhere, and that has been a major shift in in how we are able to work.
Yeah, there's so much momentum behind the game at the moment. Do you get any like crazy ideas come your way?
Yeah, I think it's really fun to see everyone being so enthusiastic and just so helpful. And there's a lot of wonderful ideas floating around. Even though I do feel that sometimes we may be a little bit rigid to very novel ideas, there's a couple of design philosophies that we really wish to adhere to, and they sometimes do get in the way of wackier ideas. So one of these design philosophies regarding unit roles and how things should work is basically this what you see is what you get philosophy regarding units. So we don't really want to have mechanics like, for example, spellcasters or units that deploy or things like that. It should be generally you take a look at a unit, you can, with a few clicks, you can move around, you can attack ground and see, okay, this shoots a plasma projectile, this shoots a missile, it has this reload rate, this projectile speed, this amount of area damage, and all kinds of things. So we think that's a very good direction going forward, especially considering how very wide the unit roster is. Since there's so many units in the game, adding additional layers of complexity above that is always challenging, even though it's very, very attractive and very stimulating and special to be able to add amazing mechanics to units because, well, the engine allows us to basically do anything on that front. It is still it's still something that we have to resist a little bit to go completely crazy on the unit roles in order to keep a cohesive view of everything and to make everything mesh well together and make sure that nothing stands out too much and becomes well, overpowered or a jack of all trades in one sense. Beyond Our Reason is generally a game not just about single units or single armies, but it's about compositions. Most of the time, most units should be used in conjunction with other units, like even just adding a single scout or something with a radar onto a larger group of other units of skirmishers or melee units is generally such a boon that it really amplifies your ability to do things with a smaller army.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Beherith. I believe we're about to be joined by Tarnished Knight. Tarnished Knight is a gentleman who works as engine development for Beyond All Reason. Tarnished Knight, if you don't mind just telling us about yourself and how you got into Bar.
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, I'm Tarnished Knight. I work with the bar team in the engine department as one of the main engine developers for the Recoil engine, which is a fork of the Spring RTS engine. I've been doing that for nearly 4 years now. God, it's been a long time. Just thinking about it now. So I got involved with the Beyond All Reason team. About 4 years ago. I was looking for a project to contribute to, bring my 20 plus years of C++ development experience, and I'd got back into the exciting world of RTS games, sort of courtesy of the COVID situation. I'd rediscovered RTS games, and I was really enjoying them. And I did a little bit of volunteer work for Ashes of the Singularity Escalation, where I became a tester for them, where we were working on a major patch update for Ashes of the Singularity. And as part of doing that, we changed the balance so much that the AI wasn't able to function correctly in that game. So I took it upon myself to do all the changes to rework the AI to work with a new balance. And in the process, I discovered lots of little tricks that I could apply with the AI to get it to do sneaky little things. And the end result was we ended up with an AI where in the previous version of Ashes, there were complaints in the forums that the hardest AI wasn't difficult enough. And after we released this patch, well, let's just say all the complaints weren't happening anymore after that. So after I finished doing the stuff with Ashes, I was like, so buzzing. So I've got to get into something, and then I was sort of Beyond All Reason through the Ashes community, and really enjoyed it. And when I was a huge fan of Total Annihilation. It was one of the main games that me and my family would actually play. My dad and my sister would play to the early hours of the morning. Probably when I was supposed to actually be studying for school and whatnot, but it was really memorable those days. So sort of brought back some of those positive memories and that. And I really enjoyed it. So I wanted to help, and the bar team was so inviting and so encouraging. I just got sucked in and haven't been able to get away since. And it's been fun all the way through.
Yeah, I can see you've got your Total Annihilation game just behind you there.
Thought I'd sneak that one in.
Lovely. Thank you very much for joining us, Tarnished Knight. Really appreciate it. So let's get this interview underway with some questions. Firstly, what led you guys to using this Spring RTS engine for Beyond All Reason and developing it into what is now Recoil instead of using something like Unity or Unreal? And how does Recoil compare?
I think I should rather field that question instead of Tarnished. So basically, the core gameplay experience around Bar has been around since maybe 2004, 2005, when the Spring engine first released, and nothing else that was even remotely as capable was around, especially regarding the high unit counts. And in the years since then, we have a couple of times investigated moving to different engines, as in maybe Unity, Unreal Engine, or anything else. But the main issue we saw with all of them were none of them were up to the scale that we have in Beyond All Reason. For having thousands of units, it really is imperative that most of the core functionality be directly in the engine, especially the heavy lifting stuff, everything from the pathing to the unit AI to the targeting to the projectile systems. These all have to be pretty much C++. And since then, I can honestly say that yes, we've still investigated it to have a look at other engines, especially as they also transition into more performant entity component systems that would allow for a higher performance on the unit count on those engines. It's just that the amount of work required to port a game like Beyond All Reason to any of the other engines is just absolutely astronomical, and it's something that we don't wish to spend the manpower for. Considering that we have pretty much our own engine, we're much more flexible on what we want to add. Sure, every engine has its advantages and disadvantages, but for us, Recoil has amazing advantages. So being able to affect anything from the Lua side, being able to have very performant C++ backends for almost all of the core functionality, and also being able to have a Lua basically front end for it is just extremely flexible and reasonably performant as well.
No,
Sure, it does
absolutely.
come with a few disadvantages. Maybe one of them could be that that we are using OpenGL, and OpenGL is kind of nearing its end of its useful life, or well, it's not being really updated anymore. And support for it, while it's still stellar on almost all consumer GPUs, but it indeed has a few limitations that that more modern DirectX or Vulkan pipelines might not have.
No, absolutely. And to add on to what Beherith has mentioned there, so you talk about the beyond we got it in the Beyond All Reason project, the engine. It's already being used by other teams, other projects that were formerly on the Spring engine. So many of the active projects, the Spring engine RTS game projects have migrated to using the Recoil engine, and we benefit from their collaboration and working with us. That provides extra testing, insights, inputs, and also keeping us on the straight and narrow, and making sure we don't go off too crazy doing things that maybe would be it's super exciting for Bar, would be might be a bit problematic for other games as well at the same time. But so it's fantastic they've come along with us for the journey on that, and we really do benefit from having them all on board with us using the engine as well.
Excellent. And can you tell us what it's like working with an open source community driven engine as opposed to using a third party engine?
We're always looking for ways in which we can develop and improve the engine. And one of the advantages of us having an engine like this with a very close knit group of projects that we've all got a much very shared set of goals. Are all inspired by Total Annihilation and that subgenre of RTS. So the things that we want to do is quite well aligned. So with that, we can take the engine in this direction, and we know it's going to be beneficial for us. We have a deep understanding of the engine. The game developers have an understanding of the engine, and with that, we're able to push the engine in directions that we want to go, rather than, say, if you were using a more third-party style engine, that's going to have to service the needs of so many different types of games. As everyone talks about, Unreal and Unity and that, and they have to service all types of games, really. And so, as a result, they can't over focus on one or the other, and therefore, they might not make decisions that would be entirely beneficial to the best interest of any one particular genre, because it might hurt others. We don't have that downside at all. So we can completely focus on what is best for a deterministic RTS game engine.
Excellent. So, being open source community driven is still fairly unique in the gaming industry. How would you say Recoil and the Bar project have benefited from being open source?
Well, for me, it's it being open source has actually encouraged a number of very talented individuals to get involved in the project. They wouldn't have otherwise have been interested in the fact that you got an open source engine draws people who want to give back passionately to the community, like myself, and that. And so we've this is something that I don't think we could have achieved if you were like a commercial entity just trying to start this up. How many commercial RTS engines manage to keep being developed and being looked after by a community continuously for over 20 years, in that fashion, and keep being loved and attended, and with the help of the community, people keeping the engine running on modern hardware, overcoming challenges, and the satisfaction that if there's something that is a problem holding you back, then the source code's there. You can get involved and help. And we've had people who have come in and do like one or two little patches, and then they're happy with their contributions and go and just enjoy the game. And then we've had people who have come and committed themselves for multiple years working with us here, and creating amazing changes and improvements. The engine has come a long way in the last 4 years while I've been monitoring it, and it's been absolutely fantastic. You try to go back to an older version of Beyond All Reason, and you just see oh man, that was so annoying, or that was so annoying, all these little bugs and that, and it's like none of that now, and it's like you forget sometimes how far everything's come. And I think for me, that's really the big thing, is that it's that open collaboration. You attract people to the open source nature of the project. Beherith, if you would like to add anything on top of that.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. And the fact that the engine is open source attracts very, very highly talented developers. That's what we've seen. And also, that's one of the reasons we've been strong on continuing Linux support, is because people who generally enjoy developing in Linux and who like the open source approach, it attracts extremely highly talented individuals. from that pool as well. Even though I think our Linux player base is just at best a handful of percent, it's still it's been an amazing draw in being able to address people who would like to contribute to a real-time strategy game.
How the hell do you guys manage a project like this?
That's actually not an easy thing to do. To be honest, one of the best features we have on that front is the fact that the community is very welcoming, and everyone tries to help in, even whether it's documentation or knowledge, wherever they absolutely can. That's been a wonderful boon for everyone, where if someone new comes in, they see something they want to improve on, or they just ask of, hey, I'd like to contribute, what should I do? And then we usually put our heads together and say, okay, well, what are your specific skill sets? What do you enjoy doing? What do you see yourself doing in this? And then there's many areas that can use polish, can use improvement, and we try to steer people towards parts of doing improvements that would be good fits for them. Now, this does incur quite a significant overhead, and sure, it's happened countless times that someone came in and they wanted to do something, and we start talking, and we see that, oh, there's a wonderful area for improvement here, but in the end, people just often don't have time to follow through, and we completely understand that. Well, everyone's a volunteer on this group, so that's totally fine, and that's part and parcel of running an open source community. But at the same time, what really drives us forward is the fact that the core team of people are so wonderfully driven and motivated that they often pick up on the difficult and more thankless tasks as well. Sure, everyone would love to have a new unit, one that's named after them, that can do all kinds of special things. I totally understand the draw behind that. That's absolutely amazing to be able to contribute, that kind of gameplay wise. But that's obviously not where the majority of our demand for developers is. And that's been the best part of the entire core team of people working here, is that they are able to pick up on not what might be the most fun thing to do or the most challenging thing to do, but what the most important thing for the game is. And I think that's been one of the keys to our success, is that a lot of people have put in countless hours on very extremely difficult tasks, everything from setting the distribution systems to the build systems up and all of this kind of stuff, where it might not be visible. In fact, you can always say that a good DevOps person is the one that you don't even really hear about, because everything just works simultaneously in the back end all the time. And we are fortunate enough to have extremely talented people who are working pretty much tirelessly on even things like the engine. 99% of what goes on in the engine work isn't necessarily visible to players. That's a good thing. It just helps us maybe scale better in times. It gives the developers better options and more efficient paths. And sometimes, the build and the distribution systems is what needs a lot of work.
Yeah. In terms of the structure, so Harris covered how we sort of onboard people and what they do. We sort of try to organise around teams of individuals. So we have our engine team, we have our game team, moderator team, because after all, volunteer isn't just the technical work as well. Volunteers.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got the mentors that train people up if they want to develop their skills. They have a regular session where they actually go through what people are doing and give them advice. Actual training sessions there. We have the moderators. That's a very difficult and very thankless task. In fact, the least thankful of all the tasks, because you get people openly complaining about moderators if the moderator's doing their job properly. But they are absolutely amazing people. Hats off to them. But yeah, we've sort of got these organized, these people, and we've got an idea of who's generally overseeing the overall activities of each of the teams. So there's some sort of organization, not just like a single blob of people doing lots of different things. We do sort of naturally segregate into teams, and where our communication is focused there. And we do also host a regular meeting where we actually have all open to all the contributors to come in, and then we can actually share progress across all the different areas of interest for the project, so that we actually have more visibility, sort of cross visibility of what's going on. And the project has been so successful that I'm having trouble keeping track of who's actually on the project and what they're doing. So meetings like this prove very, very helpful indeed. So I'd say that as it's a volunteer-based project, we have to also appreciate that it's a bit like herding cats. As Beherith said, they've got their own needs and interests and personalities and all that, and so we can just gently say, "Hey, this looks like a really good thing for you to look at. Would you like to look at it?" And they might might take to it, or they might go, "Actually, something else come up." It was like, "Oh, laser, run off." But that was absolutely fantastic. We had people there, and bringing them on board. And so, we do have some organisational challenges. It's not a business, so we don't have people on payroll or anything like that. So it's not like hey, you're on payroll. You have to behave in a particular way, and you have to be in meetings, and to put a certain amount of time in or anything like that. No, it's all volunteers. So people come and go as they see. So there will always be challenges, and we adapt and evolve, and we listen to the feedback from the contributors as well, to saying, look, we've got some problems here in we don't know what's going on here and there, and have a think about what we can do to solve that. And as a wider community and group, we talk about these things and address the issues as we go. So it's an ever ongoing iterative process. We're not perfect, but then again, it's probably impossible to be perfect in a project like this, and it's constantly changing and adapting, and we constantly change and adapt, and that's the best way to handle, I think, dynamic volunteer-based organisations such as BAR, and I think we're actually doing a pretty good job of that.
Why is there a fork from the Spring Engine, now known as Recoil, and what lessons did you take from other Spring Engine games?
So I think I can start fielding that question. So regarding the forking from the Spring RTS engine, that was done out of just pure necessity, because we had a lot of rendering improvements and a lot of performance improvements in the engine that we wanted to contribute back to the Spring engine. But the way the Spring engine maintainers have slowly fizzled out, and they weren't very receptive to the changes that we were bringing forward, they decided that they wanted to go in a different direction regarding rendering pipelines, which we felt were not as performant and not as usable for the consumers in this case, which are the game developers who develop games for the engine. And we felt that there was an absolute need to work on different aspects of the engines in a different format. And we tried to reconcile these two branches pretty early on in 2021, I think. But ultimately, that led to to us having to use a different code base. So we had to fork the engine in that sense, because our changes weren't completely compatible after a while with the upstream, and the upstream review process was being dragged out too long, while we had a large active player base playing on our game, and we had to move forward in that sense. So, and I forgot what the second part of your question was.
Yeah, sure. What lessons did you take from other Spring Engine games?
One of the most important lessons was that the initial first player experience of you download the game, you start it up, and you're playing a skirmish or a simple map, or you play online, must be as simple and smooth as absolutely possible. That's quite a difficult area to do user experience well. And to be frank, user experience is generally not the strongest suit of open source developers. I don't wish to offend anyone else here. It's not my strong suit. I'll give you that for sure. But we have had, luckily, some very, very talented people work on making the entire game a standalone thing. So you download our installer, you click install, wait a minute and a half for everything to download, and then you're ready to go. And there's no hoops that you have to jump through, no additional things that you have to install, so that the content distribution system is, I would say, at this point, flawless. Map downloads are almost immediate. You can join up any lobby, you click in, and if you don't happen to have whatever content is required, whether it's the latest update, latest game version, the latest engine version, or the latest maps, all of those are fetched for you completely seamlessly, and that's been an absolute boon in going forward. And I think that's one of the main differentiators that we've had, and been lucky enough to have a team large enough to be able to handle these challenges. Doing new player experience out of the box as a solo or a tiny team is monstrously difficult. It absorbs a lot of energy that you would otherwise rather spend on other areas. So in this sense, having a pretty large team, even from the get-go, from the early 2019 2020 days, where we had at least a dozen people working pretty much nonstop. Remember, this was also coincided, as Tarnished Knight said, with the start of COVID, was, to be honest, the best thing that could have happened to Bar. I know this is terrible to say. You might want to edit this out. I'm not sure. But for me, it definitely was the number one thing that got me back into, hey, I have a bunch of free time now. I can't go out. Where everyone's stuck at home. We have an amazing communication channel. We all have this drive to do something and the ability to get it done.
And add to Beherith what he said there, that probably one of the things that actually drew some of the contributors, certainly myself, was the absolute sheer quality of the bar website. It was It's incredibly professional, creates an amazing first impression, and that wasn't actually an easy thing to set up either. But then we also have to look at taking that through to when you actually get bar, you've downloaded it, and then you get into your first experience, and that is amazing stuff. I'm as like Beherith, I wouldn't say UI is my strong suit, which is one of the reasons I hide in the engine and I let people far more so aware of what makes a good user experience there. But so in the engine, we have to worry about not necessarily the user experience in quite the same way, although much of the stuff I deal with does have to be concerned in an indirect way to that, 'cause it's like unit movement and pathing. But we have to deal with a good user experience for the developers of the games. And one of the key lessons that we perhaps learned from coming from Spring is that the developers of the games matter, and they matter a lot. And being considerate towards their circumstances is actually incredibly important. We're not like Unreal, we're not like Unity, where there's always projects being created all the time, and then you can change whatever you want. And if a developer can't come along for the ride, they just finish their game on whatever version of the engine they can, and then their next project will start up in your newer version of the engine, for example. Whereas here with Spring, the culture is very different. Extension to Recoil is very different. That you get projects, and you get projects for life. They are like life projects, Bar, okay, and all that. They stick with it, and they come along for the ride. We can't do something that will actually cause them to have to stop taking engine updates and be left behind. That's not really an option, because they won't be starting another project. So taking on board the circumstances and the needs of the game devs is something that we actually pay a lot more attention to in the engine. So if we want to do certain things in the engine, we have to be very conscious of backwards compatibility, because of many of the projects, Buzz obviously got a big team, but many of the projects don't necessarily have as big a team, and they don't necessarily have the volunteer power to be able to rework significant portions of their game in order to facilitate changes in the engine. If we change the API, we deprecate something, add a new feature, whatever. They don't have a lot of manpower to see not only just their vision, but also to adapt to changes in the engine. So we have to be very, very active and conscious of that. And that is, I think, something that we have actually taken and learned and worked very closely with the game devs, probably a lot more closely than we used to make sure that everything we're doing in the engine is just beneficial, for the engine and getting better results and that, but also something that the game developers can actually take on and use with minimal pain and effort.
And with all this going on, has there ever been any points where you've hit a wall with development?
Do you want to take that one first, Beherith?
Yeah, that depends on your point of view of what you count as a wall, but there still are ongoing some very, very large challenges facing us. But they aren't necessarily walls; they're just very steep slopes. And one of these is, for example, creating the campaign content. Sure, it needs an entire framework for it. It needs a lot of work on that side. Going for a Steam release requires a ton of work on integrating a Steam client, and we have a huge bucket list of features that we would like for a proper Steam release, and that includes major tasks like overhauling our entire lobby communication protocol, building up a new client front end for it, along with the entire UI of that and everything. There's also another mountain of work ahead of us in taking the in-game UI that you see to issue orders on, and that needs quite a bit of love and TLC on porting it to a more modern framework to allow it to be better extensible, to allow it to render faster, to allow others to more easily add content to it and add widgets to it, and just so that it gets a more cohesive view. Because right now it's serving us well, but it's indeed a very difficult framework that we currently have to work with. And I could go on and on listing all of the very steep slopes that we have ahead of us, but up until now, we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, or anything that we felt was a solid brick wall. We're constantly chipping away at everything, and I know, yes, indeed, the rate of progress could be faster, but this is all volunteer. And compared to that, we still see every day our commits pouring in to all areas of development, and we see incremental progress on every single front. And sure, while that is slower than what could be in the best possible of all worlds, it is still progress going forward. And that's amazing to see.
No, absolutely. Part of these steep slopes is not only just because they are big and the task. Trying to create a campaign, for example, is a massive, massive undertaking. It can't be understated just how many sort of sets of skills and everything you have to bring together for that. But because we're a volunteer organisation, we need to encourage people that are interested in taking on those challenges to be there, and that's part of one of the challenges that we have, making is having volunteers that will actually pick up particular pieces of work. You can't force that like you could in a business organisation. We're really down to, can we get the volunteers for that? And we've got means by which we put like a board saying, hey, there's these things that we're interested in trying to go. Can we, is anyone interested? Please reach out to us in that respect. And the campaign was one that was very difficult to get any movement moving forward on that one. I'm delighted to say that we now have a group of volunteers that are interested in doing the campaign, and they're getting it moving forward. And the amount of energy that they're bringing to that is absolutely incredible. They know that they've got a big task ahead of them, but it's just the energy and the passion and that comes through. Just drives it. Is very satisfying to see. But that again, just one of those challenges, as you say, is just having volunteers available to actually pick up on particular tasks.
Yeah, and considering the game is free and this is all done by volunteers, the game looks incredibly polished. It looks so professional.
Yeah, That actually ties back very well to what Tarnished Knight said about having a great website. You can't really underestimate the value of good presentation. And luckily, we've had Isex Quick doing most of our visual coherence, basically our art lead, Isex Quick, and he's done an amazing job on the website, and he pays a lot of attention to making sure that everything is visually coherent and fits together well, and that he even does most of the audio work as well on that front. And it is very important to see how much work and polish is needed there, and how much work Isex Quick has done in bringing together everything. Presentation does matter. When you're showing someone, a new game, hey, try this new game with me. I just got this. You show them a website. It's extremely important to have a good, solid first impression on bringing that in. Because if you see a temporary website with under construction logos and blinking HTML tags, then you're not as likely to continue investigating further. So that's been, I think, something that is definitely easy to underestimate how important it is to have a solid visual presentation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The presentation of the game, from the website to the graphics, everything is superb. What we'd like to talk about now, though, is the recent stress testing that's been going on in the game. Could you maybe just describe to the audience what that is all about, what it's involved?
TK, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think this is we had a big celebration event. This was to celebrate the phenomenal number of Discord members that we got. We hit the 40k Discord member threshold. I was like, wow, this is absolutely incredible. To celebrate this, we held a series of celebrations. It was supposed to be a 24-hour stream that continued on to be a bit longer, and all the while we were opening up lobbies to have much larger player games than that we normally allow. This is a special one-off type. Well, it's a one-off. It's an event-only thing. We just, instead of being limited to 16 players in a match, it's like, well, we're going to open it up with multiple. The idea of like play on the word number 40 here, so it's like 40v40, or a 40-person free for all, or even bigger. I think we did actually see a 40v40v40v40 at one point. It was like 160 odd players in a single match, which is kind of like mind blowing. And as the engine developer, I'm watching this. I was like, is it going to hold? I was like, this is being streamed live, and people are doing these things with the engine, and it's like, oh my word! I was like, heart palpitations and things. Amazingly, it all held together. And it performed, which was absolutely incredible. Piece of engineering on that front. But yeah, so it was a big event. Rooms being open, big games being played, people doing crazy things. Massive armies hitting over 10,000 units in a match and things like that. It was it was quite an incredible stress test of the system that we had. Lots of people online, testing out, network bandwidth and stuff like that. But it really did put the engine through its paces. I was delighted to see how well the whole thing held up under that kind of pressure with so many people. It was like, if there any bugs or things come out on the extreme side, they were relatively minor, and we did learn some interesting things about the engine. Apart from blimey, it's actually handling this, and it's like, okay, well, we've obviously done a pretty good job on that front. I was monitoring what was going on during that event, taking a look at performance of the engine, and was, from observations and my understanding of the engine, was collecting data, going, oh, okay, maybe there's something we can do there to sort that out, or maybe something we can do there to sort that out. So it was quite an incredible event, not only just for the players playing and doing something that wouldn't often be able to do with Bar and crazy games that were happening, but also from us as a team being able to see how everything was holding up, and looking forward into the future of what we might need to do and where we need to put our time and attention, because at some point we'll be going to Steam early access in the future, and we'll probably expect that there will be ways in which the system are going to be stressed due to that as well. So more like network infrastructure and that. So prepare for that, and make sure we're going to be able to handle the hopefully increased flow of players that we will get for going to Steam. We've got an amazing amount of people playing Bar at the moment, and more than I ever thought we would. So at the early starts back in the early days of COVID and then just to see the player numbers just skyrocket like that, and to think that when we go Steam, it's probably going to be even more than that. It's been absolutely incredible, and so we have done events like this before in the past, and that have stressed the system out, and we've learned things from it and adapted, and we're getting bigger and bigger, and the events seem to be going smoother and smoother despite them getting bigger and bigger, which is a good sign.
Yes, it does stress test a lot of other aspects of the game, not just the engine. It's a huge stress test for our infrastructure. So for the main lobby server, it was important that this could handle it. For the individual battle rooms and the lobby clients, it was also a big stress test. For the online battle hosts, it was also a very strong test, and for the in-game UI as well. And it's been amazing. Luckily, the good thing is that we've been incrementally increasing the size of these special games as our Discord grows, of these special events. And luckily, we've learned already a lot of things, and we're able to fix quite a few things. But then again, there are so many bugs that you can only reproduce with or only even unveil when you have actual real players doing it. So if we were to set up a stress test with 160 virtual hosts or just fake clients or any kind of mock that we could think of, it would never be as varied or as real or as representative of actual loads and actual problems than a real stress test is. And it's also a really fun event for everyone. I think I cannot think of off the top of my head of another RTS that could smoothly work with 160 players in the game, and going up to 10,000 units is quite special for us. And it's really nice to see the entire community come together to enjoy these special events, because they are big things. Everyone's involved, from the even smallest organization, and no aspects of, hey, we need people to run this room to make sure that everything's going smoothly, from casters to all kinds of personalities going in and out of a large 24-hour cast, to all the preparation of the server guys getting together and thinking of, okay, how can we break this? What could break? What do we need to look at? What kind of performance metrics do we need to log? What do we need to keep our eyes open for? Is there anyone on call to restart something important if it does eventually crash? It's been amazing organizational work, and our community manager Taku has done an excellent job of bringing everyone together on this and making sure that all bases are covered and that everything can go as smoothly as possible.
So, what were the results of the stress testing, and how did the AI perform?
Generally, it went pretty well, from all I observed and feedback that I had. So in terms of the AI, the stress test was probably more of a focus on the number of players, and when you've got a room full of players, there's not really much room for the AI. But there were games that were played using special AIs that create what we call like the PvE modes. So there was the Raptors and Scavengers, and it was quite fascinating to watch that you have like a team at the top and a team at the bottom of the map. Their objectives is to obliterate each other, but in the middle of the map you had the AI, the enemy scavengers, is like just plonk in the middle, and they with their purple mist and everything spreading out, and so the players had to divert some of their attention to not only just the enemy team, but also to keep the the enemy AI under control, because it was an enemy to both sides. And that was quite interesting, watching the interaction between the teams. It's like trying to keep the balance right between dealing with that. But the AI did handle itself in those games, and certainly added something to them. So we didn't exactly have like loads of AIs with it. So it's not like it was like we had a room with like 100 AIs all trying to battle each other or anything like that. So it was more about how does the PvE AIs interact with such a big game, and obviously, understandably, that did put extra stress on the engine, on the system, and so yeah, there's obviously performance costs, because obviously you've got all this extra work that you've got to do. There's obviously no trying to hide that, but it was certainly interesting for us to actually see how it does and its performance characteristics of that. So we were able to collect data on how those modes were performing under such a extreme situation. So so that was certainly very helpful to see that as well. But yeah, the stress test itself didn't exactly like go in and stress the usual AIs that people play against, like barbarian AI and that, because rooms full of players, it's like open the floodgates and players are filling in. It's like you haven't got any room for regular bots because everyone wants to play. So so we wouldn't have seen that though. Big AI games would be a problem really.
So have you managed to break the game yet?
There are hard limits in the engine to prevent things exploding, provided those handles do actually kick in. There's a hard-coded limit of the number of units, for example, that the engine handles, and that's actually distributed across all the players evenly. So the more players you add, your personal unit limit is reduced accordingly. To sort of like compensate that. So the engine does things to try and keep things sane. So even though the engine can, in theory, there's a hard limit in the engine at the moment of 32,000 units. We're never going to get there. I don't think we're realistically going to get there unless there's a massive innovation in computer technology to overcome those limits. Bear in mind, this engine is properly fully simulated. The projectiles are simulated. The smoke, fire effects, and all that are all simulated, as well as the unit simulation. And terrain has an effect on everything. So it's actually a very complicated simulation. So what we have seen is that the engine seemed to acquit itself relatively well under a load of 10,000 units. When I say units, that does count buildings as well as mobile units, because of the in TA style games that buildings are so capable and interactive that they are effectively units in their own right. It's just they don't tend to walk around. But I did see one game that hit 15,000 and hadn't actually crashed. So that was a really good sign as well. So I don't know if we've necessarily found how exactly the limit of how far we can push the engine. Possibly. There's obviously, as the engine gets pushed harder and harder, everything sort of naturally slows down, because we've got like a smoothing algorithm, so that if machines are getting too overloaded, we reduce the rate in which the simulation updates so that you get a smoother experience. The idea is that we don't want your machines pushed so hard, generally speaking, that everything becomes a stuttery mess. If it's a known phenomenon in computer video games that you always want to be GPU bound, you don't want to be CPU bound in the game, because if you're limited by the GPU, there's so many techniques that are used to smooth out the gameplay. Whereas I'm sure many of your viewers will have probably played games where they've actually hit the CPU bound, and it starts becoming stuttery messes. You get pause frames for like noticeable periods of times, and game judders and stuff. And because of the nature of the workload in a game itself, it's so varied. There aren't generally techniques for limiting that, except techniques that reduce the load on the CPU, so that you like reducing the number of updates that we do per frame. So what we tend to find is that rather than it become a juddery mess in bar, it just slows the game down. You start going into like Matrix style bullet time sometimes if you push it hard enough. But yeah. Yeah, so it's a bit difficult to say whether we actually found the exact limits, because it will also partly depend on the hardware that it's actually running on. If you come to a big game like this, with 80 players, and you bring what we colloquially call a potato PC, it's going to struggle, and it probably will become a bit of a slurry mess much sooner than someone who's come in with a top of the range Intel i9, or one of the new AMD Ryzen 5s with the massive 3D cache and stuff like that.
So what do you think is the maximum number of players who can play at any given time?
On the player count, we actually have a currently 251 or 252 hard code. That's the highest player count. And one of the interesting findings of this stress test event was that spectators also count towards this 250 limit. And the interesting thing was that we had spectators joining in and out during the game, and this resulted in the recycling of IDs for spectators that have left and joined. So overall, there were a total of more than 250 people who at one point joined into the game. And this actually caused issues downstreams, as those IDs got reused for someone who left and then another spectator instead of them joined. But this is also this is just a code type limit. But at the same time, I don't necessarily feel that outside of special events, this kind of player count for a team game is really sustainable. So I don't think it's definitely fun. It's definitely a delightful romp and something outside of the ordinary. But I don't think that it's necessarily a good direction to just continuously increase player count. That's generally why we've stuck with the 16 player limit in regular approaches.
No, absolutely. The thing is that this, we do have to stress that this is kind of like only special events. You open up the player counts beyond that. We have a balanced team. I talked about us having people broken up into organisation, and we actually have a team that focus on the balance of the game, and they've got to try and keep bar balanced all the way from the 1v1 situation all the way up to 8v8, 16 players, and there's a whole load of what's good for a 1v1 is not necessarily good for an 8v8, and vice versa. So they have to balance all these, everything in between. It's not an easy task. I don't envy what the balance team have to do, and it's constantly monitoring that. If we were to try and open up the player count beyond that, we would massively increase the issues for the balance team, because we would effectively be saying that this game is balanced and fun for big games, and for events like this, you just jump on, you play, and then by the time the event's gone, that's it. You don't have all that time to sit there and try and work out a meta for that kind of style of play. And I think these kind of big events would stop being fun if it became too regular, that meta was starting to be established and people knew how to, how do we win a 64 player game and stuff like that, because they'll find things that are completely unbalanced, which is absolutely fun for a couple of games. It's like, oh, I've done this thing and it's really crazy and it's broken and that, but when everyone starts doing it all the time, then you then start getting problems, and it could just be that, well, we can't balance the 1v1 because the 64 versus 64 is currently doing this and that. So I think having big events that come along every so often and absolutely crazy games, and you can just go wild and find crazy things, it's fine, because it only constrains any gameplay issues to that, and it isn't going to likely frustrate the players, because they're exploring and discovering these amazing things. But for something that's going to be more regular, like regular modes, we can't have things going too crazy, because if they go crazy, they go imbalanced. And when I say crazy, I mean that a unit is completely broken, as opposed to, or OP, as I like to say. That needs to be obviously balanced, otherwise it's going to disrupt people's long-term enjoyment of the game. So that's why we can't just open the floodgates to say, right, we're just going to have this stress test wasn't there to say we're going to have big player games as a regular thing. No, that's not the intent. Is to make sure that when people do push the game harder and harder and harder, that we know that the technology is holding up, and we do know there are people that will like have these amazing games where they decide they're going to sit there for 4 hours building up massive armies just so that they could just then smash them together at the end of the 4 hours. I do know that they are out there. We want to make sure that they can at least enjoy bar when they do things like that.
Oh, absolutely. And at about 8 players per team is approximately the sweet spot of where you can still have the scope to communicate with your allies, and where your individual contribution to the outcome of a game is still significant, but the entire game does not ride on you or any mistake that you might make personally. And we think that's a very important role, where you can still communicate with 8 players that, oh, I need help, or hey, I'm pushing here. Let's move together. And at the same time, you're not going to be the single person responsible for steam rolling the entire game. And I think that's a huge aspect to it. And these kind of celebrations are just, well, celebrations, to be honest. They are wonderful stress tests and really fun events, and something new and something fresh, something amazing that everyone can be a part of and celebrate the game together. But we do still intend to keep the core gameplay experience limited at 16 players on a map.
So with these results now in hand and everything we've talked about so far, what is your vision for Bar and the Recoil engine in the longer term future?
Beherith, do you want to take the
Sure. Well, I think looking anything further than the Steam release might be a little bit, looking too far into the future. But what we absolutely do want to get done is a good tutorial that really teaches you all the mechanics and gives you a good idea of how to get started with things, so you don't accidentally end up on the wrong foot. And a campaign is also something that is just such a massive draw for a lot of people. Most people don't play multiplayer online RTSs, and I completely understand why. That's actually one of our strong suits. Is the large team size does make the online multiplayer experience less jarring than it would for a 1v1 style of play. So that's something that we absolutely wish to work on in the future. I have a massive backlog of graphical improvements that I want to do. Luckily, there have been a few people reaching out of asking how they can help with that. So there's a lot of special effects. That shader patch has more than half a year of work in it from quite a few of us, and there's some amazing effects going in on the short term and in the long term. Absolutely. As we hopefully will hit the ground running on the Steam launch, and that's going to be great. And who knows where that will take us. And on the Recoil front, I think I'll have TK answer that one.
Yeah, I'll just add to the bar thing there on the plan there quickly. So you've got the Steam Early Access release, which is what we're all focusing on as a team. And then obviously you've got into the future of like Steam 1.0 release. So 1.0 release is quite a bit more open to what will be in that and how things will evolve. That will probably sort of look more like what you would expect a 1.0 release to look like. But the Steam Early Access is the bit where we're trying to really get to. And as Beherith said there, the campaign, absolutely critical. It's fantastic. We're getting a lot of movement on that. And of course, we've got a new front end lobby and that we're going to put in instead of the choppy one that we got. And we're also looking at the back end infrastructure, as Beherith has talked about. The lobby communication protocol, because we want to make sure that can scale up. You have to appreciate that the technology that we're working on, most of it goes back 20 years or whatever, back to the early days of the Spring and all that, and in classic Unix sandbox mentality fashion. There's lots of little bits that are specialist tools in what they do. And much of that is that technology is still around, and it was all done by passionate people that just wanted to play these type of games back then, probably without even believing in their wildest dreams of the visions of grandeur of where games like Bar would actually reach today. And of course, the way it's designed wasn't necessarily with that mind of scaling up to these crazy numbers and that we're hopefully going to see. So we need to make sure the infrastructure and that is in place. It's stuff we've been working on for a while, and it has to be worked on for a while because it's going to take time, it's going to need maturity, and so on and so forth. So I think we're in good shape for that. So alongside the bar releases and stuff going on, there's the Recoil engine that is also evolving and improving. And in terms of like the near future, like we talk about the the bar Steam early access release. I think for the most part, the engine is pretty much ready to go. If Bar said, right, okay, we're ready to hit Steam, go early access, the Recoil engine would be, yes, sir, we're ready to go on that front. It's mature enough. It's been battle tested, with thousands of people playing Bar every day, and looking at the bug reports and things that we actually get, and decent crates and stuff like that. We feel the engine is in pretty stable and mature sense, but that doesn't stop us from trying to do better to achieve more. And there are definitely things that we want to develop and improve and build on. As Beherith talked about, it's got all these graphical improvements, and some of the visionary things they want to actually bring in need support from the engine. So our specialist low-level graphics developer, Ivan D, is the one in sort of charge of the engine side of keeping all that moving forward and keeping up with the amazing vision which people like Beherith, Ice Quick, and Taka have for where Bar's going on that front. There's just a lot of that stuff is just absolutely incredible. But the engine side, we are looking for opportunities to improve system performance. Like in the performance test, I noted that there was a few opportunities that we could smooth out gameplay by improving some of the areas of the engine. There's parts of things happening in Bar that are happening on game side that would make sense to bring into the engine. You appreciate the Bar. So we've got the game side, we've got the engine side, and the game side is primarily Lua based. Very, very common for games to have the tools and that written in Lua, especially for the more forward into the gameplay and player facing side that many of these games have. Lua is very good modding language and for that kind of thing, and it's quite performant. But there are times where Lua does have its limitations of how far you can scale it up. So there are aspects that we'll be looking at. Perhaps maybe we can bring that into the engine. And there are other things that is like, take things out the engine, put that into the game. You have to appreciate that Spring and in the past when it started, Spring started off as an application, which you would then, switch out the units and the stats for the units and stuff like that, and the mods and the animations and all that. It was mostly a very much this is the type of game that you get, and then you can do modding around it, and then it gained things like Lua and additional capabilities, and it transitioned from primarily a application type product to becoming more and more engine like as through the years, and so we are continuing that journey with Recoil, and there are elements that we're still rebalancing to keep get the right balance, if you will, between what's on the game side and what's on the engine side, because as much as I absolutely love C++ and I'm an engine developer, I have to admit that the engine team is perhaps a little bit smaller, might be an understatement, than the game team. The game team's absolutely huge, so we want to make sure that that we're empowering the game team to be able to go out and do all these amazing things, and that the engine gets out of the way. The idea is that, in my view, that the engine should provide the mechanism by which you can achieve these games. The game provide the policy and all the exciting stuff. Well, I say exciting stuff. Engine's pretty exciting. I don't want to downplay that, but the bits that probably more fall into the realm of this is game design. It's more the artistic side, whereas the engine bit's got the more scientific side, I suppose, is a way of looking at it. And we haven't quite got the balance right there due to the history of the engine, and I think we will continue to work on finding that. We've done exploratory work to try and find ways of like really pushing out the engine. We had a look at doing all our, I said that our particles earlier, like smoke and fire trails and stuff, were simulated. That means it actually is calculated on the CPU side, and that has an interesting side effect that if you can see the particle, it will be drawn. If you can't see the particle, it won't be drawn because of line of sight and stuff like that. So you get a cool idea there. But with so many particles and so many effects and flashes and everything we want to put in, there's been an exploration of can we shift that to the GPU. So there's been research into that, which has found a lot of very interesting challenges around that. So I don't know if it will necessarily be something that will ever come to fruition. Possibly not. Maybe we'll have a breakthrough in that, but we're exploring many different avenues like that to push boundaries. And this is the time for the Recoil engine to do this kind of thing. The more exploratory, the more excited, big bang things. Because once we start getting into the Steam early access, there's going to be an expectation from our player base that things are going to be much more stable. So we'll have to be a lot more careful about what we do. And we talked about challenges on the project, like walls, but as Beherith says, we don't have walls, we just have steep slopes. What are the challenges that we have? And if people want to actually really help with the engine, but you're not, for example, a C++ coder, but one of the things you can do for us if you want to help, that's a massive help, and you don't have to be an expert programmer or anything for this, is to put yourself down as a tester. One of the things we really, really need more of, and would help us immensely, and especially with our ambitions, is having testers and a lot of them. If when we release the engine, we do not want to accidentally introduce bugs to the system. That upsets thousands upon thousands of people are playing this game every day, and we don't want to have an engine update and it starts causing problems for them and it ruins their experience. So we set up the engine in a test server. We try to test it out, make sure there's no major issues. And we also invite testers in to come in, jump on that test server, have some games, try things out, try and break it. Let us know if anything isn't right. And the more people we have doing that, because let's put it this way, the bar is very, very complex. It's video games are very, very complex. It's not like you can just draw up a spreadsheet and say, right, I'm going to enter in this value into this text field, hit this button 2 times and see if it actually explodes, kind of thing. No, it's just you could do so. If you tried doing that, you'd find that the graph would just spiral out of control. It's incomprehensible the amount of test cases you would have to do to cover everything. So we just need people that enjoy playing bar and say, well, you can continue enjoying playing bar. You can jump on the test server and keep playing bar and tell us if anything goes wrong or anything starts misbehaving. That's something that would be a massive help for us. And the more testers that we have, the more confidence we have in the stability and quality of the release that we put out. And certainly going forward into the future, that's probably going to be a factor into the type of work that we'll be able to look at. That if, for example, we find ourselves stuck with relatively few testers, it means we're going to be a lot more conservative about the changes after we go into like a Steam release that we can realistically push out, or what we have to do to actually take on slightly bigger pieces of work. But if we have like 10,000 testers on our call, then we can do something far more flashy and exciting with the engine. because we know we've got this massive group of testers that are going to be the chances of anything the game breaking or impacting the game in a negative way or ruin people's experience would be so reduced by the just sheer number of people. It's like if it's there, they're going to find it, and then that would mean that we'd have a lot more confidence in the future. But so come back to your question about what specifically we're doing in the engine and looking forward to do in the engine. So I've talked about performance improvements. I've talked about some of the graphical stuff that we've got going on. Really, it's a lot, because the team's smaller. It tends to be the volunteers that we get, and what they want to do for it. So it's a bit more difficult to have a precise plan beyond some of the more obvious things. Obviously, I'm looking at the performance. He's looking at the graphics, and then it's kind of going to what people need of the game and what we can do to support that. We did have some bigger pieces of work that have now been delivered into the engine, but whereas I was letting this question drag on a little bit, so you probably want to ask some other things.
Yeah, so one of my last questions is, looking back, what elements of the development of the game and the engine are you both most proud of?
Do you want to go first, Beherith?
Yeah, it's easy for me. It's graphics.
The game looks amazing.
Graphics and performance are the two things that I'm the most proud of. Performance isn't not even remotely entirely my achievement, or not my sole achievement, but a lot of the graphics is, and I'm very, very proud of that.
And on my part, I'm be slightly cheesy and say I'm proud of the team. I'm proud of what we've been able to achieve as a team, and I can't say the people are lovely in Bar. We work together, and sure we have disagreements at times and stuff like that, but it's absolutely amazing, and I'm really proud of the team that we're cultivating and building. Just like I say, they should all be patting themselves on the back. So if you're watching this, give yourself a pat on the back now. Okay, yeah, so well done, pat from me. Keep it going. You're doing absolutely amazing. In terms of maybe my personal contributions that I'm probably most proud of, I will probably go with the thing that probably caused me the most pain and suffering for the longest time, and that is I brought in what we call quad tree pathfinding system. I was working on pathfinding systems for the engine, and we had the incumbent engine pathfinding system that's a very traditional pathfinding system, but because of the way that it works, just without going into too much detail, it effectively puts everything on a grid. So if you think like a chessboard, how everything can only go in 8 directions, for example, and it's just that kind of thing in a 3D game where you expect units to walk in 360 degrees, and if you watch them, you'll notice they will have a tendency to travel in 8 directions, which does look a bit weird in a 3D game. In a 2D RTS game, fine, you'd expect that because of the sprite sheets and the animation directions and that. But for something like where the unit can rotate any direction, you kind of expect them to move in a more natural way. So so we already had something in the engine known as Quad Tree. It had been done like over a decade ago. It was an experimental pathfinding system that was taken to a point, and then it was kind of abandoned. And I was impressed with the way it gave us better results in terms of the unit moving around generally. And so I thought, let's see if we can actually modernize this and overcome its limitations and challenges. And little did I realize how many challenges and limitations that approach had. As just a quick example, I had a test where I spawned 400 tanks in the middle of a map, and they're just moving and shooting, creating wrecks and stuff like that. And when I started the journey on the pathfinding optimizations on my old machine, that it couldn't bar couldn't maintain full simulation speed for that. And then when I finished, the incumbent pathfinding system was maintaining about 1.5 times simulation speed, so it was actually able to handle this scenario and go faster than its standard simulation rate. So it was a big leap there. The quad tree system, when I put it in initially, the game just turned into a slideshow. It was like watching a PowerPoint presentation. It was like 1 frame a second. That was how bad the performance was when I started the work on that scenario. And so I had to take that through and bring in multi-threading. I had to rework a lot of the systems, bring in new optimization techniques, and a lot of optimization techniques, actually, thinking about it. And that it now actually performed in that particular test. It was actually performing at 2 times simulation speed, or they're up to. Which was absolutely incredible, because I didn't think it would actually outperform the existing pathing system. But as with any algorithm, I will stress that there are times when any algorithm is faster or slower than other ones. But to actually get one up that is, in 99% of cases, at least as fast, if not as faster than what was there, was actually quite an incredible achievement on that. And then the other one was the amount of memory it was using. It was using 16 gigs of memory on this ridiculously large map that I had as a test map that 0K pointed me to, bar the whole thing. It was like, okay, it's crashing machines, and I was able to reduce the memory consumption all the way down. I shaved off nearly 10 gigabytes of memory usage in this ridiculously oversized map that you would never actually run in bar, but it was a good thing for pushing pathing systems to its limit. And so the techniques and everything, I was having to use everything I knew about programming to push all that. Now the results of it, not knowing where this was going to go from the beginning, and then to take it through all that, and to have it actually now used as the primary pathing system of bar, is quite something I'm quite impressed by. Is an achievement I'm quite proud of. And I'll just put a special thank you out to Aku, who was our performance tester on that, who every time I thought the performance was good enough, he would find a test where it'd say, no, it was actually, it's like, this is terrible in comparison to the existing pathfinding system, and then I'd have to find some optimizations to fix that. And he just kept doing that over and over. Every time I thought I was there, it's like, oh no, actually, what about this scenario? And go, right. But thanks to his diligence on there, we were able to optimize QTPFS to the point where you won't easily be able to find a scenario where it will perform badly, because he just thought of everything and tested everything and just went harder and harder on it. So a special thanks to Aku on that.
And finally, before we get things wrapped up, do you have any final thoughts you just want to share with the bar community?
No, we'd like to thank the fans. We'd like to thank everyone who's ever contributed. You're the ones pushing the entire project forward, and it's been wonderful seeing you and talking to you and fleshing out ideas and implementing stuff. And for the players, keep enjoying the game, and play it the way it makes you happy. And we really enjoy having you guys here.
Yeah, I'd say that we do it for the players, we do it for you guys, and to see so many people playing and enjoying bar, and especially during the 50k event that was quite recent, there was just so much positive energy, and it was so it was like, in Dungeons and Dragons terms, like drinking a mana potion. We often talk about developers needing enough mana to take on projects to keep things going, and if they just don't feel up to it, often say, "Oh, we don't have the mana for it." And I have to say that all the players out there that are playing and enjoying the game, and especially during these events, and that it was so invigorating for the mana, and it helps keep the contributors and the development teams going on, and certainly the words of encouragement from them is also greatly appreciated. So you might not think much about what you're doing, but it really does help. It does make a difference, and we do appreciate you all for everything that you do. Even if you're just a player playing, it still matters. And for those who have decided to take a step and actually be a contributor, thank you so much for that. No matter how small a contribution is still a step forward. You might not think, you might do a little thing, you might think, oh, that's just something that's not actually all that important. It's a change that goes in, it might make someone's life a little bit better, and it's one more thing that the core team don't have to worry about. So you take that off their plate, it does help, it does matter. And so yes, thank you to everyone, and hope you continue to enjoy Bar.
Yeah, just to give it a little bit of scope, there's almost 30,000 commits in just the game itself, and that's not counting the engine, that's not counting the lobby, the server, all the other infrastructure stuff. So just the game itself has 30,000 commits to it over the past 5 or 6 years. That's an absolutely monstrous amount of work from a huge community, and that's the only thing that drives us forward and makes everything possible.